It's time to give back to the community, and what better way to do that than by having yet another Strippin video. This time we are tackling comics all requested by the comics creators over on the Webcomic Relief Discord and on my contact email.
This is not a happy read.
So throughout my years of meeting a ton of different people and seeing their favorite media, I come to a conclusion, and that is that some people just don't like to have their feelings challenged. So they would rather opt for something a little more easily digestible, which there's absolutely nothing wrong with. You know, the type of stuff where here's the good guy, here's the bad guy, all the good guys live happily ever after, and the bad guys gets vanquished. Simple, easy, nice, safe. Again, I must stress there's absolutely nothing wrong with this, especially if you're in a place in your life where you just need an escape from the bad stuff. Where you don't have to come to terms with the fact that the good guys don't always win and have to confront a villain who might actually be a good guy when you really think about it. And if you look at my completely reasonably sized video about Berserk, I think you'll get an idea that I am one of these people who like to challenge their emotions a little bit. I like reading stuff that can make me feel bad feelings, cause I'm essentially a monkey with a quantum computer when it comes to dealing with my emotions. Meaning, it's too complicated for me and instead I'll opt to just throw feces at people. So instead, I get to explore these feelings with the media I consume, and oftentimes, the media you consume that gets really dark and depressing ends on a hopeful note, and you are in turn instilled with the feeling that, hey, if gods can continue to move on and find purpose even after the eclipse, then I too can go on after a shitty day at work.
Which, and I know this is an aside, but this post here, yeah, I think I would rather if you actually called the Rooftop Swordmaster Korean Berserk, because this post seems to understand Berserk even less.
So, all of this to say that we are going to be covering a webcomic that deals with complicated issues about struggles many young people can identify in their day-to-day life, and that comic is Never Too Late. Never Too Late is a webcomic about the mother Susan who at the ripe age of 40 decides it's time to attend school again. While there, she falls in love with cheating on her husband who is also cheating on her and...
Oh, there's a different webcomic called Never Too Late. Yeah, okay, that explains it, because this one really, you know, like it read very much like a It is a porno. Yeah, okay. That explains a few things. This is awkward.
Never Too Late is a webcomic written and drawn by Nina Ha. Nina has for a while now talked about their comic in many of my videos' comment sections and eventually took the plunge and sent me an email asking me to review their comic. And frankly, I've kept them waiting for long enough. Now, before we get into the review, I'm gonna have to ask you to look at the screen for a second. I would do the thing where I snap my fingers and call out the artists who are drawing while listening to this, but I've already done that joke, so yeah, hi. Anyway, this comic deals with these following subjects. If you're not comfortable with these particular topics, there's a time code here, and here, just for funsies, that will take you to the final verdict of the comic.
Just gonna give you guys time to skip if you wanna. In the meantime, here's a shameless plug. If you like what I'm doing and want to see more of these videos, please go throw some money at me on Patreon or Ko-fi. That would be very much appreciated. Anyway, watch this bottle flip. That landed perfectly, don't worry about it.
So, Never Too Late follows Ernest and Adrienne. And while you may think it's your typical romance comic, I assure you it is not. Now, when you first check out the comic as it is now, you will be met with this image here. And I want to tell you right now, do not let yourself be fooled by this image.
This image here did an unfortunate amount to deter me from reading this comic. Let me explain.
So to be perfectly honest, I'm getting a little fatigued by fantasy. So when I saw this image of Ernest and Adrienne holding stars wearing robes, I was more or less just preparing myself cause here we had a comic about eating disorders, abusive households and panic attacks, and I was just preparing myself to take all of that dark realism and throw it in the bin so Ernest and Adrienne could become magical beings fighting fantasy creatures or whatever. And I kept waiting for this as I browsed through the comic, bracing myself for this twist and getting more upset by it cause this was really good. It was incredibly grounded, the characters were well defined with real struggles, and those struggles seemed to be at the forefront and treated with the amount of seriousness and agency they deserved. Man, it's gonna suck when this comic turns fantasy and ruins the story.
But see, I've been lying to you because I wanted you to experience what it was like being me and being as visually crippled as I was when I first saw this header, because if you look here, it never actually turns into fantasy.
Never Too Late is a slice of life comic in which heavily flawed characters try to just exist despite the demons they're facing. It sets up this tone right from the get-go with the character Damien suffering a panic attack right out of the gate. And with how Ernest reacts to it, we know it's not supposed to be a terrible attempt at humor, but rather it's being treated with the seriousness it deserves.
If you ask me, and I know you're not, don't worry about it, but if you ask me, if you're going to make a comic like this that deals with all these very poignant and serious subjects, you need to be very careful with what you're doing and think about damn near everything that you're saying about it. And it feels like from page 1, Nina Haas shows that she knows what she's doing.
Damien is flipping out because exams are coming up and his roommate Ernest is trying to get Damien out of his funk by taking him to a CD sale at the local music store. There's a lot of stuff I like about this. We know Damien is into music by him wearing a Pink Floyd t-shirt and even having a painting with music notes in the background. Through this, we understand why Ernest seems to be gleeful that he can tell Damien about a music sale, cause otherwise we'd probably be thinking this amount of hype for a CD sale was a little odd. I also like it cause, and this is slight spoilers, we learn later that Damien was tortured by a mentor that instilled deep fear in Damien of failing exams and tests. And this is actually something the comic does really well in general. There's another instance where we see someone being really good at math, and it gets revealed later that it's because someone's been teaching them. The comic has this nice understanding that it's perfectly fine to have an ACB way of telling information instead of the usual ABC.
It makes it feel so that the characters feel like they have existed even before the comic first started. Does that make sense?
Anyway, the two decide to go to the music store, and that's where we bump into Adrienne. While we've been briefly introduced to her prior to this is where Ernest and Damien first meet her, and in both instances, Adrienne proves herself to be an energetic and fun character, not just by how she behaves, but also the type of levity she brings to the scene. It's like serious things happen not because of her presence, but despite of it. I also gotta just give a massive kudos to the comic's art. I feel the way you use the background helps telling me how much I should focus on the world. So if you don't show the background at all, you're effectively telling me that the world isn't important, something Made in Abyss suffered from. But when you really fill every frame with detailed backgrounds like this, you're telling me that it's kind of vital that you understand that this is the real world, that these are real people with real issues. Now there's the issue that the backgrounds are so detailed that you end up noticing that the poster here hasn't gotten properly translated, but Anyway, Adrienne unfortunately causes the three to miss the opening of the CD sale and they decide to come back another day. But this is where some of the main themes of the comic rears its ugly head, with Ernest collapsing on the street.
To be fair, Ernest has looked rough ever since the comic first started. Man looked like he had contracted the bubonic plague or something, Jesus Christ.
After going to the hospital, we find out that what Ernest is suffering is not the plague, but a severe case of being 2D, cause yeah. Anyway, it turns out that the reason Ernest has looked like death could sink its clutches into him any second is because he's extremely malnourished. Ernest used to be bullied due to his size, and so to combat that, he developed an eating disorder that left him dangerously malnourished. Again, we're being shown Nina's ability to give information later that makes other stuff click. At first you might think Ernest just looked sick because he was, well, sick, but now we know the real reason. Heck, it even retroactively makes other bits of information we've already seen take on a different meaning, such as how his jacket and pants looked a little too big for him, which I hear is something people with eating disorders sometimes do to hide the size of their bodies.
Is Nina Ha's art style perfect? No. It's perfectly alright, very much in the same vein as One, the creator of Mob Psycho and One Punch Man, in that sure the art isn't the best, but they know perfectly well on how to convey information, and I think that is honestly more important when it comes to a comic.
In the hospital, we find out that Ernest is by no means a dumb kid, and in fact that might be why he's been pushing himself so much, as he set himself up in front of his folks to be damn near perfect, and so he wished to also lower his weight, as it's been bullied into him that that's a massive issue. But luckily, Adrian is there to yell at him, and she and Ernest become quick friends. This is where the comic does something I really like. Most, if not all, of what we have seen thus far has been from the perspective of Ernest, so much so that when he passes out, we have to be told what happened prior to him getting to the hospital. Well, from here it moves the focus over to Adrienne, showing she has just as much agency as Ernest, and we instead follow her as she interacts with Damien and Ernest in the hospital. I will say that it feels like Nina was kind of testing the waters a little here, as Adrian's happy-go-lucky attitude gets dialed up a little too much, with her just out of the blue fireman carrying Ernest to prove a point. But I think they learned from this, as it's never reached this point again. Anyway, from their interaction, Adrian and Ernest decide to join the same school together, and that's where chapter 1 ends.
This is a very strong start to the comic, both with how it sets up the characters and the different themes that the comic will be tackling during the course of the comic.
And from here, it's kind of more of the same, but in a good way. We dive deeper into Ernest trying to deal with his eating disorder and learning to accept himself. We also tackle Damien, who suddenly has to welcome this new girl into their friend group, and we follow Adrienne as she deals with her own demons from the past. The three make up an interesting trifecta because it's very clear that Ernest and Damien have been hurt really badly in the past and thus have their guards up, hence why Damien in particular is so reluctant to let Adrienne into their close circle of friends. But while Adrienne also has been horribly hurt in the past, she does not let that control her, and we see how this change of pace positively influences Damien and Ernest. It's an interesting story to follow on this premise alone, to see these three deeply hurt characters deal with their individual demons in different ways. And while I would love nothing more than to sit here and tell you that the comic does all of this damn near flawlessly, I can't, as, well, there are flaws. And my biggest flaw is easily that while it's nice the comic focuses on very human issues, it feels like it doesn't know how to properly start talking about it. People will spill the most personal and sincere beans to anyone at the tip of a hat.
Now, this might again be that whole thing about me and emotions and the monkey and the quantum computer thing, but I personally need about 3 months worth of a running start before I can ever admit to my parents that if I'm sad or something, right? So to see a comic where people will just start venting all of their frustrations all of a sudden is a little weird.
When Adrian first does this in the comic, it actively comes across as a joke, but then later it's supposed to be taken seriously. There's also not a whole lot of ambiguity. No words have multiple meanings or a vagueness that could mean something else. It's always very on the head. It honestly feels like Nina just really wants to tackle and talk about these serious subjects with no fluff, and they want to make sure you know that those are the prime topics of the comic. But unfortunately, it makes it so that the comic feels as subtle about this as a kick in the face. It's when you make a realistic story that covers such real and sensitive subjects that you really need to be careful with how you portray everything surrounding those subjects. Because the instant something is a little too unrealistic or weird, it will stick out like a sore thumb. Another unfortunate example of this is Ernest's bullies. Now, admittedly, just because you've been bullied before doesn't mean that every bully acts like the ones that bullied you, but I have a really hard time finding these bullies realistic. They're almost cartoonishly evil. There's no gradual devolving into insults and harassment. No, we're talking round start abuse like,
please don't jump, I beg of you, don't do it, don't do it, don't.
Adrian's mom is also very, for lack of better words, cartoonish. Now, don't get me wrong, I've been blessed with never having abusive parents, but bro, is Adrian's mom female Hitler or what the fuck? It feels like Adrian just existing is enough for her to be pissed at her. Here I personally have a lot more zero? Like, I think it's better if I explain it visually because I suck with words, but you see this meter here? If we assume this over here is being nice and this over here being evil, I could use more here around the middle, just cold, uncaring, freezing Adrian out, rather than actively being all the way over here on the right where she fucking hates Adrian. Bro, I half expect her to spend every night with a full moon screaming Adrian's name to the skies in anger like, curse you, Bale! I hereby vow you will rue this day! As for presentation, in terms of being aesthetically pleasing, the comic does look a little lackluster. The shading is rather rough and the poses sometimes come off as rather robotic and stiff. The voice bubbles at the beginning were also really rough, with how they were sometimes a little too close to the letters within the bubbles, and would often appear in a way that made you read them in the wrong order. And way too often is the grammar and writing within those bubbles faulty, with a plethora of spelling and grammar errors. This does get better as the comic goes on, but it's still something worth bringing up. Also, I don't know if it's because the comic is on Webtoons or whatever, but it feels very odd that a comic that deals with super grown-up topics like parental abuse, eating disorders and what have you, can't say shit or fuck. They can't even show someone flipping the bird. But honestly, all of that is quickly pardoned by just how good Nina is at presenting stuff. There are just so many neat details that elevates this comic's visuals to a higher level. And just to make sure I cover as many as possible, here are some examples in no particular order. There's this shot here of Ernest entering his room and we get a perfect example of him as a character. There's a basketball, which refers to him being on the basketball team. You can even tell his team is doing good with how there's a medal hanging around the picture of the team. The medal being on the picture frame uses Gestalt's power of proximity and lets us know the medal is from the basketball team and not something else. We also see that he has a diploma on his wall hinting at his academic prowess. The dog and clothes on his bed makes it feel lived in, and it also establishes Ernest as a down-to-earth guy who is not super worried about order and perfection, which just further highlights that his strive for academic excellence is rooted in something else than just his personality. And lastly, in the foreground we see drumsticks and a music player, highlighting Ernest's love for music.
This frame here comes rather early on in the series, but Nina Ha uses it to establish perfectly that Ernest is a well-established character way before the comic even begins, rather than just, like being molded as the comic goes.
Next, there's shots like this that I really like. Now, admittedly, it's not the most impressive shot ever, but I love the fact that I have seen that exact pen and that exact bracelet before in the real world. It really helps, once again, selling that these are real people. Another thing I like is that instead of drawing in the stuff on the page, it's clearly a real page being superimposed onto the paper. It again gives it this feeling of realism, and Nina actually makes it feel like it fits. They do this again later with some money, which, I'll admit, set off a cartoonishly long investigation for me to find out what country this comic takes place in.
I landed on Poland? Do correct me if I'm wrong.
If there's one thing you can truly say about Never Too Late's presentation, it's that it feels like Nina considered every frame. In this example, you can see the date down in the left. Also, just to be petty, this is how a viewfinder should look, not whatever the fuck this is. Anyway, if you look at the date, you can see it takes place late May. And if you look into it, you can actually see how accurate this is with how when the comic begins, it's clearly winter, and then we're being told 2 to 3 months have passed. So it clearly tracked that when the comic began was sometime during February. Again, it's not just some random numbers, it fits with the story and even tells us about the comic's world. And a time that's not super vital, like the time of day, Nina seems to have some fun with it by writing leads.
How very 2 decades ago of you.
Lastly, I just want to talk about this shot here. What a powerful shot, man. Like, goddamn, this is really solid. I know professional comics that don't even pull off shots like this. Now, again, fuck the lack of shadows and all that, but just look at the composition, my guy. Prior to this, we know Adrienne has a very strained relationship with her parents, and this is the first shot we see of her mom. We don't even know it's her at this point, but from the very get-go, we are through the composition told just how intimidating, dominating, and foreboding the mother is. Heck, we even get a feeling that Adrienne is imprisoned, with it almost looking like she's in a prison cell. Just look at how tiny she is compared to her mother. Everything in this framing screams that the mother is a threat.
If there are 2 things you should take away from reading this comic, one of them would be the obvious theme of the comic, which is that it is never too late to turn your life around. And the other one is learn how Nina uses visual communication to express stuff through their comic.
The first impression is a 7. I'm not even trying to be funny, but expecting the comic to go into fantasy legit hurt my experiences. But that's 100% on me, and what I got instead was really solid. The writing is a 6. I do like that the comic knows what it wants to do, it just stumbles a little with how to do it. The art is a 7. While the art itself could use some more work, the composition and presentation really blew me away. All in all, I'll give this comic a 7. If you don't mind the heavy subject matter, it is a surprisingly easy comic to pick up, get into, and enjoy.
Never Too Late is a webcomic I warmly recommend that you check out, very much like the next comic, which is Epic Chaos.
Next up, we got a webcomic where we have to travel back in time, to a simpler time, 2010. Yes, I'm basically reusing my joke from my video about the lounge. This time, however, we're checking out Epic Chaos. Epic Chaos is a webcomic by Melissa McCommon. Mel has worked over 12 years as both a professional freelance artist and a comic creator, and you can really tell. As of making this script, she started hosting YouTube streams where she's trying to teach people how to draw and all sorts of cool fundamentals. Hell, she's been insanely helpful on my own artistic endeavors, where she's not been shy of redlining my art and even drawing the exact thing from the ground up to really point out your flaws and what you're doing right. Hell, you might even remember me mentioning her in my Rooftop Swordmaster review, where I mentioned she'd gone above and beyond to explain why Rooftop Swordmaster's art looked like ass.
I've come to realize that that is not going above and beyond for Mel. That's just stuff she does, just for the love of the game.
Epic Chaos is a supernatural drama comedy comic that had its beginning in 2010 and is still ongoing. The comic's been remade and recently came out of a hiatus, so if you read the comic back in the day and think things look or operate differently in this review, that'll be why. The comic starts in medias res with the protagonist Mel talking about how one should be careful what you wish for, and we see whatever has her mulling this over is her being tied up and gagged. Now, if you're thinking the same thing as me, I want to nip something in the bud. Mel here? Yeah, that's not Melissa, the creator of the comic. Now, one can argue that we got a case of Yosh on our hands where, boy howdy, the two share similar names and interests to a noticeable degree, but Melissa has outright stated that Melina is not based on her, and the similar name honestly just comes from a, in her words, really dumb notion of what constituted copyright protection.
And while not as blatant as Philip from Yosh,
The comic moves on to the day before the incident that honestly ends on a rather interesting cliffhanger, being that Melina's captor looks identical to her friend, with the only difference being the captor having crimson red eyes. As for on the day before, Melina is showing this new student around campus who seems to have ulterior motives. Now, I know it can be a little jarring to constantly pause, but I just need to point something out when it comes to epic chaos, and that is just how much fun it is to look at. It honestly feels like Melissa had a lot of fun with making the comic, as you can often find really cute and fun details if you look at it. Like this character Nathan pops up to save Melina from the new student, and you're like, oh well, that's very well timed. But you can then look at the page prior and see Nathan is actually watching them in the background. And if you are a curious sort like me, you can even go to the big establishing shot even earlier and find that exact tree, and sure enough, there's Nathan. Whether it's a conscious decision or just Melissa having a bit of fun, it really feels like she's encouraging you to really take in every page and pay attention.
If the audience feels rewarded with how they interact with your medium, they're going to keep doing that as they go through it. And it feels like Melissa is really using that to their advantage.
Nathan, believing he's coming to Melina's rescue, pretends to be her partner, and after the student Luca has fled, it becomes evident this rescue mission was completely one-sided. I really like the exchange that Melina and Nathan has following this, as it really highlights their relationship, which is a really interesting thing to focus on, especially because of how the comic started with quote-unquote Nathan having captured Melina. With how they talk to each other, it also becomes very evident that Nathan is one who acts before he thinks, and clearly has feelings for Melina that he keeps hidden. At the same time, Melina seems to be unaware of these feelings, and is also a little too much of a people pleaser with how she wanted to let Luca down easy. This is also a character trait that becomes more important later, so it's really nice that it's being set up right out of the gate.
You know me, I got a soft spot for when you can tell a comic has been planned more than not at all.
Next we get our first example of the comic feeling very 2010-ish, with their mutual friend JJ glumping Melina and groping her tits from behind. Now, if you don't know what glumping is, either you're too young to be watching my videos or you actually had a functioning high school life. But glumping is this thing that seems to have originated from manga and anime, where it's typically used for slapstick comedy, where a character tackle hugs someone. And as if that wasn't indicative enough about the age of the comic, there's also a rich plethora of talking about being a weeb and pirating anime.
Who would ever do such a thing?
We also get some more neat storytelling with how Melina immediately has a tissue ready from her purse to stop Nathan's bleeding nose. And the bleeding nose also gives us some more of Melissa having fun with their art, with how JJ is teasing Nathan about being agitated raises blood pressure, which in turn worsens nosebleeds, and we can see on the handkerchief that more blood indeed comes out. You gotta wonder if the man got his entire brain mushed with how the cloth is completely soaked though. Like, bro, just clump it together and shove it up your nose and let it coagulate there.
What, 2 years of martial arts with this being my reach, and you don't think that I have become intimately familiar with how to stop a nosebleed?
Melina has been tasked by Nathan to draw an illustration of him and his hidden nature that he can use for his class, and we see through the art and what Melina says that while she may not reciprocate Nathan's romantic feelings, she still holds him in very high regard. Heck, we even see her referring to Nathan as her best friend, which seems to bum Nathan out a little. There's then this very strange segment where Nathan's roommate Jeff pops up, who seems to be in a relationship with a cup of corn with a face drawn on it like Plank from Ed, Edd n Eddy. Now, if this is just Melissa having some fun, then more the power to you. But this is a comic that deals with magic and fantasy elements, and even animated objects later, so having this played off as a joke to then later make something similar with a sentient piece of paper that's supposed to be taken seriously It's a rather odd choice, I gotta admit. Anyway, after this, they head to Melina's home where she lives alone cause her mother is out traveling. Here, JJ talks about her crazy roommate who's super into cold cases and brings up an example about how there was this cult that kidnapped and sacrificed people and only left behind remains with weird markings cut into them.
Gee, I wonder if this is gonna come up again.
Like, it's so weird, right? But this comic is very subtle about certain things that flows neatly and naturally. But then there's things like this, or a thing later, where they're talking about Melina's phone having up and vanished, where, like, I can see what she's trying to do by setting up these mysteries that are then all gonna come together into the grander plot, but it's so fucking obvious when we're being quote-unquote subtly given this information. The cool thing about mysteries is that it's not always immediately obvious when we're being given vital information, but these are 2 entire pages in a row talking about this on the surface innocuous information, and it's not really fooling anyone. And it's extra silly cause later the whole thing with the cult is brought up again where it's expanded on, and it feels natural to be explained to this extent at that point in time. So, I don't know, make it less obvious, make it initially a throwaway comment, give us some red herrings, and if you have to have them have these long talks about certain subjects, then also have them have these long talks about nothing subjects that ultimately don't lead to anything, so these instances don't stand out as much. Right now, it's like this.
Yes, welcome, Lieutenant. I'm smoking on my invisible pipe like always, you see. I have found the evidence of this murder case, but I have hidden it to test your immaculate prowess in investigation. So, my dear Lieutenant, where could it be? Is it behind the curtain? Underneath the carpet? Or is it hidden in that immaculately lit flower pot there that has been used to store the ashes of the family's hamster for multiple centuries and that has been painted in a red hue of the victim's blood? Could be anywhere, I say, Lieutenant. I have lost my marbles 7 years ago.
It is, however, after this that we are reminded where Melissa shines, which is with her art. The instant the friends leave Melissa home alone, we see her withdraw back into the house where the color's tone immediately becomes darker, hinting at as jolly Melina is on the outside, there's a sadness hidden underneath. Also, I had it written in my notes and I just have to bring it up, but just look at this amount of detail. Like, bro, what other artist do you know that will bother to remember the smudged ink on the bottom of the artist's hand? Heck, we even see the blue specifically comes from the background of the piece he's been working on, and if you really want to get spicy, you can even assume the smudges here are purposely done by Melina's hand to gradient it out. Bro, I can even swear that this extra deep blob of paint here is bleeding through on the paper, which is what we can then see on the back of it later.
Melissa is one of my favorite artists I've covered on this show. There, I said it, sue me.
Fitting with the darker visual tone, we also see Melina looking far more cold and dejected. Heck, we even see her take medicine, which... Okay, I can't fault you for not being able to see what this is because the image is way smaller than I remember it. Luckily, Melissa has provided me with some much clearer scans, and you can see she's taking a bottle of Amocin, which is used to treat symptoms of an enlarged prostate. Don't look at this thing over here, don't worry about it. Now, again, I don't know if Melissa actually wants it to be as subtle as I want it to be. And here, I don't mean the quality of the image is so bad you can't make out the text. But if it was up to me, I would probably have her take a different kind of pill. And then have the Amocin still be in the cupboard. Melissa has already proven multiple times that she's fantastic at rewarding us for dissecting a page. So it feels a little like such a missed opportunity to just kinda highlight the bottle like this.
Again, I don't know if this is supposed to be as subtle as I would personally prefer it to be. And if it's not, then by all means, throw all of my criticism in the bin where it belongs.
I have bitched a bit about the writing, so here's something I really like, however. In the beginning monologue during the In Medias Res opening, Melina mentions how you should be careful about what you wish for, and she hints at this exact same thing as she goes to bed. This subtly tells us that things are now going to start dealing with why she says why you should be careful about what you wish for. And sure enough, an evil prayer comes out through Melina's phone. Whatever the prayer is, we see what looks to be Nathan in a red abyss swimming towards the surface, but his eyes are black and shining. When he reaches the surface, we see him emerging from the drawing Melina had made of Nathan that had fallen to the floor. He spots Melina in the bed and crawls up towards her, his eyes glowing crimson red. And that's how chapter 1 ends. Chapter 2...
I'm just joshing ya. This is where I'm gonna leave the comic hanging for now. But if you're interested in what I've been explaining thus far and want to see where it goes, I warmly recommend that you check the comic out.
Epic Chaos is a really fun comic to not just read, but to experience. The comic itself is perfectly fine, but Melissa's art just takes it to a whole nother level, where it becomes so much more fun to go through. The comic has this 2010-esque feel to it with the anime, the glomping and all that, and I mean that in the best way possible. It's wacky, but that wackiness doesn't ever feel forced. I'd honestly say it feels like if Youboss was made by a girl and competently. Cause you truly get the feeling of a comics creator who loves manga and anime making their own piece inspired by it.
Complete with self-inserts and all. Okay, look, I'm sorry, alright? But the amount of times I have rewritten the script because I kept fucking Melissa and Melina up is staggering. There's even an outtake here of me fucking it up. I've come to realize that that is not above and beyond for Melanie. No, she just...
As great as Epic Chaos is, however, there are some finer details where I personally feel the comic is coming up short. As almost exclusively with the writing. The comic is fun to read and all, but it very much feels like Melissa's first real writing experience. I'd say though that nothing ever feels wrong, all the pieces are there, they're just not used super well. Like, okay, this is gonna sound extreme, but after the red-eyed Nathan appears, no one really acts realistically anymore for a very long time. And hey, I get it, shit's unrealistic, we're in a straight up fantasy territory. But most of the good stuff in these situations, in my opinion, comes from how realistic characters deal with unrealistic situations. And this cast just doesn't really act that realistically. Like Melina holds the red-eyed Nathan up with a bat, yet has all the time and composure to get distracted by a random piece of paper laying on the ground, then takes her eyes off the red-eyed Nathan, bent down, picks up the paper and studies it. And also, no one is ever really even slightly perturbed by a perfect clone of Nathan is just there. There's damn near nothing in their initial meeting that would be any different than if it was just some rando intruder inside Melina's house. Not even Nathan seems taken aback by it more than just, huh, that's weird.
Also just a funny observation if you would, but red-eyed Nathan gets smacked so many times in the head with different things, like everything from like bats to shovels and what have you, that the man cannot be severely brain damaged at this point. How did that image get here? Huh, what a funny coincidence.
The cast of the comic is a really colorful bunch in the best of ways, and they complement each other in very interesting ways. JJ should, by all means, be a character I can't fucking stand, cause normally I really hate when you can tell the creator is trying too hard to make a character energetic and likable. But JJ just nails it. There's just something to her go-get-em attitude that's super infectious and lovable. Like you truly feel this is just how she is, rather than it is the writer trying to copy a trope. Meanwhile, Nathan adds a nice dose of agency to the comic, which is fitting seeing he's also the one that the clone appears from. He is clearly the straight man of the group, and the humor is typically highlighted by how he reacts to it. That being said, he is not above also acting eccentric, especially when his masculinity or affection is tested. But what's really interesting is Melina, the protagonist of the comic. The comic makes it no secret that this is a girl with some skeletons in her closet, but it doesn't beat you over the head with it and spell it out. It comes through very much with how she acts and other small details you can find when reading the comic. And Melissa trusts you to be curious and attentive enough to search for these details and keep them in mind as you go through the comic. I also do enjoy that Melina is such a people pleaser, and the comic doesn't shy away from showing how, while this might be nice to those around her, it comes to Melina's detriment. There's a nice sense of maturity to this level of writing that I like.
Thus far, the comic has only really dealt with 4 to 5 different characters, but all of those characters are super strong.
The comic is, in other words, despite some nitpicky issues, still a really fun comic to read, helped greatly by this colorful cast. While it's a tried and true character dynamic, Melissa really makes every character shine with their colorful personalities. I have been rereading iShield 21 on the side while reading Epic Chaos, and I noticed that Melissa invokes the same thing iShield 21 does, which is that in almost every scene where the characters are interacting with each other, their personalities shine through, and you will often find small details in just the way they talk to each other or what's visually happening in the frame. And despite the comics sometimes dealing with dire situations, Melissa never fails to make her characters shine and even manage to blend in comedy in a natural way. And it's actually funny and feels unforced, cause you truly feel this is what that character would say/do in this situation. It's not like Ryogo, where the sky could be falling down and she would be like, "What's the deal with airplane food?" It really feels like Melissa knows how to properly weave exposition, drama, and comedy into these chaotic scenes, which makes it all pretty epic.
You might even say that it's epic.
Honestly, any more I can say about this comic would just be repeating myself. This is a super good comic that I can warmly recommend. The initial setup has a few hiccups, but once it's going strong. I know this might deter some people, but I truly mean this in the best of ways when I say that the comic is a comic that gives that funny slice of life feel you only get from anime, while still managing to tell a simple yet exciting story. In fact, while I have joked about it feeling a lot like anime from the 2010s, it also feels like Melissa got inspired by all the right things off of anime. And here I'm not just talking about Nathan looking like Vash the Stampede, but just that they were able to dissect what made anime work and how it did, and then took that rather than just trying to copy anime wholesale.
So no Sherlock Holmes-kun or Hermione-chan here.
The first impression is an 8. Epic Chaos tells you exactly what it is, what it wants to be, and what to expect right out of the gate. The only faults you will find are some you will only notice if you're truly looking for them, and if you're not, or heck even if you are, then you'll be immediately hooked regardless. The writing is a 7. While there's definitely room for improvement in the finer details, the instant the cast comes together and bounce off one another, it just becomes an absolute blast to read. The plot is interesting, the characters are great, and the pace is solid. The art is a 9. I don't think anyone would be shocked about this high score with how much I've been singing this comic's art high praises. Melissa makes not just every page, but damn near every frame a treat to read. Melissa clearly has fun with the art, and it doesn't come at the cost of conveyance, so it's just an absolute treat from start to finish. All in all, Epic Chaos gets a solid 8. This is a comic I can warmly recommend you go check out. Whether you're into comedy, slice of life, or a little bit of mystery, this comic has it all in spades.
Epic Chaos is a super fun and interesting comic that I can't wait to see where it goes from here. I'm going to be leaving a link, as always, for the comic in the description, as well as the YouTube channel, so you can go and support Fuck!
I asked in my Discord, hey, any of y'all got a quick comic I can review for Strippin? Because I want to try and highlight some of the comics in my community, right? That's when Bones of Ruin appeared and suggested their comic Uboss Dailies for review. Now that's all good and all, but that's when a revelation happened. A blast from the past. Bones of Ruin here is the creator behind Demon Juice. No? Doesn't ring a bell? Okay, I can tell some of you are not long-time followers. Okay, fuck you, I guess. It was one of the comics I reviewed in my very first Strippin videos back in the day. The creator that had been hounding me in every video's comment section, asking me to check out their comic, and when I finally did, it turned out their comic was, kinda ass. Well, they've stuck around and put their nose to the grindstone, and some of the art they have posted on my Discord was legit great, and showed some impressive improvements, so I figured that
I'm just gonna skip ahead here, cause what the fuck is this?
I am legit stumped. I don't know what I was expecting going into this comic, but it sure fucking wasn't this. I could try and explain it, but I think for you to get a better understanding of my dumbfoundedness, I might as well take you along with me through the first strip of this comic. The very first strip is of this girl announcing the comic is under construction, which gives her free reign to do whatever she wants. Okay, that's pretty cute. And so down here we see the fucking. What is this? These three other characters seems to be lost in time. Who are these people? Why is the red-haired one so mean? Good question. Anyway, the next strip has this mouse girl who I found out is called Tab, interacting with what's clearly supposed to be a furry mouse version of Nikocado Avocado, and she and him eat themselves fat doing 9,000 mukbangs. Tab then jokes she's going to be skinny again on the next page, as this was just a one-off joke, but Nick is going to be stuck being fat. Meanwhile, underneath the strip are the three from earlier talking about how Tab is the blue guy's mother, who says that he went back in time to save her from Skag the Witch. The two others seem unfazed and would rather talk about this alligator they ate.
Now the main problem area is up here. All of this going on up here is what's causing me the most physical discomfort. It's like a visceral reaction of discontent coming from this area. This area is not good either. I hate this, but I'm mainly worried about this.
So it would seem like the top comic here with Tab is purposely sticking to the Gaga strip formula where everything has to be reset in between pages and nothing really has consequences. They are all filled with references to terribly dated unfunny memes. Whoops, how did that get in there? Anyway, they're all filled with unfunny, terribly dated meme references and somehow even worse grammar. And this bottom comic here is actually the meat and potatoes of the comic, because this is the one with an actual plot. Except no, now the top comic also has a continued plot despite it actively making a joke earlier about the contrary. Anyway, Jack, Copper, and Abby, who apparently doesn't matter because she has no profile on the character page, travel across time because Copper wants to show Jack how they get stuck in this time whatever they're stuck in. That's immediately aborted, so Copper can go crazy and oh shit, the crew are infighting now, This is gonna be interesting to follow. So we're now back to dank memes.
I swear, this guy saw this clip here and thought it was the funniest and most based shit ever.
That was something. I am become meme. Yeah, pretty much. I'm living the meme. It's like there's living the dream and there's living the meme, and it's pretty much what's happening, you know. You're like,
I'm a keep it a buck with you guys. From this point onward, I have officially clocked out. It took this comic less than 20 pages to break me. I could kinda sorta get behind having this sorta meta narrative where the top comic was a gag or strip comic, and then there were other characters who were aware of it and reacted to it. That could be the recipe for an interesting story. Kinda like Mystery Science Theater or something, you know? But now, both the top comic and the bottom one are switching back and forth between gag or strip comics, with sometimes continuing a narrative and other times, well, not, taking turns making horribly dated memes. Like, motherfucker, it's 2022 when you uploaded this, and you're doing the Sam from Lord of the Rings saying potatoes meme? Homie, that joke is 16 years old now. And then the comic does the impossible by derailing even further. Without warning, it just completely removes the bottom comic for a spell, and when it comes back, it's just filled with a bunch of actual slurs. Also, just throwing it in there, the comic will, for whatever reason, just cuss and swear like a sailor without it adding anything. Typically, you would use cussing and swears like an outburst or a quantifier or to show distress of a character or something. Here, the characters will just call you a fucking retarded fat for the fun of it.
All while flip-flopping between cartoony rats in Max Scrooge's vault to weirdly sensual images of Tab working out. Not since Cloud Scratcher have I been this confused as to who the fuck this comic is for.
As the comic, much against my will, continues on, the continued plot starts becoming more and more prominent, but despite that, the gag or strip nature will every now and again, without warning, appear before disappearing just as abruptly. Storylines will be dropped on the floor and forgotten, only to suddenly be picked back up, dusted off, and used again before being dropped on the floor again. The comic will every now and again poke fun at the whole notion of having any type of serious plot and antagonist and call itself a humor comic, but frankly, this might just be the least fun thing I have ever read.
I was closer to laughing while reading the comic about abusive households, eating disorders, and bullying, for fuck's sake.
It is so weird, because I have personally talked with Bones, and every interaction on my Discord has been cordial and nice. They seem really mature and like they have a good calm head on their shoulder. And then you read this comic and it honestly feels like something an unfunny schizophrenic person who grew up on Minecraft videos would write. It genuinely feels like Bones think memes are like the highest level of humor. But that's until they seem to poke fun at how shitty memes are themselves. It feels like a very, in lack of better words, cowardly comic. Every time you feel it's trying to have an identity of its own, it'll shift to be something else, and every time it tries to do something, it will quickly hide behind some joke about how shitty it is. Like, not exactly this, but it'll do something akin to, and here's this magic witch. Man, magic witches. Could it get any more corny? It feels very much like those people who want people to compliment their work by presenting it with, "Don't you think this looks like ass?" It also just feels, while reading it, like the comic is actively mocking you for wasting your time reading the comic. Like you can go, "Wow, that's unfunny," and Bones will be right there going, "It's supposed to be unfunny, idiot."
I was just pretending to be retarded! It was ironic shit posting! Oh, fuck!
This is not a comic that feels like it wants to really do anything. You'll get plots that feels like Bones just spun a wheel and picked whatever it landed on. We're having Tap becoming pregnant and getting married, the story about how Satan got cast out of heaven, and someone playing the banjo to create matter. And all the while, the comic seems self-aware that it's just begging for death, with some characters even asking, when will this shitty comic end? And I know this is gonna sound like a weird thing to complain about in a comic like this, but there's also just a lot of plot holes. Like, they keep talking about how Tap has this epic meme magic, when I am fairly certain she's the only one I have seen not actually using magic. And yes, I did say meme magic.
Bones suggesting I read this comic honestly feels like they're trying to get back at me for shit talking their Demon Juice comic back in the day. And honestly, that is valid.
At around the 100th strip, the comic actually does take a turn into a somewhat interesting territory, when the comic's antagonist, Skag, grabs Tap and all her friends and family and throw them into the quote-unquote real world. Suddenly there's gang wars and superheroes, suddenly there's an actual continued plot, and it's legit interesting even though the comic maintains this attitude where everything is covered in like 8,000 layers of irony and oh so many grammar errors. Right, okay, I don't mean to be a grammar Nazi, but this comic is damn near unreadable with all the grammar errors. Your and your, there and there, past and past, ill and I'll, then and then, two and two. It is just never fucking right and constantly has you stopping up trying to piece together what the fuck is actually being said.
Hand to God, I don't remember having ever seen it this bad before.
As for the presentation, it is not great by any means. Again, it feels like Bones is making an active effort in making the comic look as poor as possible so they can laugh at anyone who would complain about it. And if that is indeed the case, then laugh away, bro, I guess? And I say this because there'll every now and again, seemingly at random, be these moments where the art just takes a leap and a half. It's still not, fantastic by any means, but it's clearly showing a very competent know-how in drawing and shit, even framing and presentation. And it's so much and consistently so that I truly believe Bones is dumbing their style down for the majority of this comic.
But why? Why would you do that? Why would you do any of that?
Like, look at this page. This doesn't look bad by any means. There's some crude shading, some dynamic poses and camera angles, and every frame is filled with backgrounds and stuff. Shit, it's so good you might even ignore the moving on. Like, look at this next page. These faces are solid and there's some great angles. I really like the 6'9" look this character has, which fits for a flamboyant gang leader. The gang leader that, oh boy. Right. So, I'm not gonna call this comic racist or bigoted. I'm not gonna be that guy. But if I was to think of a racist and bigoted comic, this is the type of stuff I would put in it. Does that make sense?
And if it's supposed to be funny, then again, it just feels like Bones would think this is the most super-based thing in the world.
Like, you can't make fun of anything. So then it's like, comedy sucks. It's like, nothing's funny. You can't make fun of anything. It's like, legalize comedy. Yeah.
While reading the confusing beginning and the clusterfuck of gag strip comics and memes make me confused, reading the future strips where things actually has a plot and stuff just makes me sad. Cause Bones of Ruin clearly is much better than they let on. The comic is covered in so much irony that it doesn't dare say and do anything with its chest. But every now and again, the mask slips and we get some legit awesome segments where the art style actually aids it a lot. I genuinely don't know why Bones insists on being so self-depreciative. If it's just because they don't care about the comic, if it's to protect themselves from feedback, or it's just their form of humor. God, please, don't let this just be their form of humor. That would fucking suck. But whatever it is, it makes this comic absolute ass, and you truly feel that Bones can do so much better.
I honestly believe, and I mean this with all sincerity, and Bones, if you're watching this is straight to you, and I mean this like as positively and encouraging as I possibly can. There is stuff within this comic, small nuggets that are super fucking good, and I genuinely believe that if you put your heart to it, you can make something insanely great. But this comic is not it. And if I have to post another cringy Elon Musk video to show you how cringy the writing is, then I swear to fucking...
The first impressions are A2. It is unfunny, it's cringy, and I would not blame anyone for immediately dropping the comic like a bad habit. The writing is a free. The comic feels like it's constantly doing a joke you're just not let in on, which makes for a truly frustrating read. The art is a 5. The beginning art leaves a lot to be desired, but when you can see Bones actually apply himself, it actually isn't that bad. All in all, Uboss Dailies gets a 4. This is very much an anti-webcomic in that it feels like it uses how self-aware it is to its own detriment and makes for a frustrating and annoying read.
Now, I want to put a small asterisk next to the score of Uboss Dailies, and that one goes out specifically to Bones. When I initially covered Demon Juice, I was not very nice about it. Don't get me wrong, I'm not exactly being super nice about Uboss Dailies either. But the review back then was of a very, very poor comic. And this is not a great comic either, but there's definitely been an absolute improvement. And I gotta give it up to Bones for seemingly having taken some very scathing criticism and has honestly taken it to heart but not let it discourage them. And that's the last thing I want to do with this show. So I gotta give it up to Bones for just taking the criticism as it's intended, which is to encourage people to produce something better if they so desire. If they don't, that's completely up to them, but it just feels like a disservice to not bring up how much Bones seems to have grown. And with that, I'll see you guys in the next Webcomic Relief. Take care.
Ready to spit a verse. On haters I unloaded, be ready to get his hearse. I'm about to serve a notice. If Harlem don't get him first, send him down to unemployment, cause homie gon' get this work. Right. Hot bins, every honey gets top 10. If she hops in, then more than likely we not friends. Look, I'm locked in. Hit you like Skelly, your top spin. First I pop, then I'm out like Pirellis on stock rims. Flies in the game, still applying the pain. Since Milk was top billing and Light was riding the train. These paper thin villains get scraped and thrown in the plane. 85% of rappers is fake and so is their chain. Now that's a no-brainer. 36 in my chamber. Now a moment of silence, I throw a L up a banger. Lyrics is not a singer, don't ever forget it's gangsta. The ladies, they get the thumbs up, coppers just get the finger. But look, baby, my vision getting clearer. I'm looking in the mirror. I'm saying to myself, that's a fly nigga. Yeah, Harlem is the city.
Hello. Thank you for watching this episode of the Webcomic Relief. As with all other Strippin episodes, I warmly recommend that you show some love to these creators whose comics we have covered this time, as, you know, I wouldn't have a channel if not for these people. I don't really have a whole lot of announcements this time, so let's just get into the people who helped sponsoring this video. Amocin. Amocin doesn't want to push anything this time, so just know they're super awesome and a long-running supporter of the Webcomic Relief. Knudson. Nicholas hasn't gotten back to me about what he wants me to push, so for now, just know that he's a really cool dude. Sebastian Vandborg. Sebastian wants me to push the Twitter account Curious Zelda, which has a rich plethora of cute and funny cat images. He doesn't own the account or anything, but he just really likes cats, so there you go. Athlai. Athlai hasn't gotten back to me about what they want me to push, so you know the drill, they're just a super awesome person who deserves all the love. Hugo Junstrand. My boy Hugo, who is the one making my title cards, is working on his original series called Torch Drop. It's a fantasy story where animals steal body parts from other species. If this sounds like your cup of tea, there's a link to Hugo's YouTube channel down below where you can watch some animations that highlights the tone of this series. Marshall Starr. DR, as we call him, is the artist behind the cool sci-fi comic called Marshall Starr. If you want some good old sci-fi western action presented with some banging art, then this is the comic for you. Why Not Warrior. Why Not Warrior wants me to push the webcomic known as Hope. The comic is about superheroes that get into trouble and who has to save the universe from an evil empire known only as Spade. When the young girl Raylan gets targeted by this evil empire, she joins forces with her friends to take them down and save the galaxy. Foxy Boy. Foxy Boy wants me to push their webcomic called Happy Father's Day, a Silent Hill crossover comic. Now, don't let the fact that this is done with mice fool you. This is a great and spooky ass comic, and I warmly recommend that you check it out. And of course, let's not forget to mention all these lovely people. Mama Boy, Drake of Adrian, Nina Ha, Rojaru, Sasha Sketchy, Shiv, The Bonsai, Tomadak, and Maratri. And also a huge shout out to the people that you're seeing on screen right now. If you want to support the show, please go to my Patreon. Here you can donate anything you want and get to watch my videos early, and all of it will be much appreciated as it helps supporting the show. Just go to www.patreon.com/riser2eyes. You can also go to my Ko-fi and donate some money there if you are interested. The link is in the description as well. If you want to watch me on Twitch, you can do so at twitch.tv/crownlessking with 2 eyes. Here, you'll sometimes see dumb stuff like this happen. Like, hey, let's make this hospital. Hi. That was fucking scary looking. Let's make this hospital where we can't find our way around. What are we gonna do when someone is like in desperate need of treatment? Oh, you will have to solve my puzzle free. If you don't want to support the show financially, at least think about liking the video, subscribing to the channel, or sharing your favorite Webcomic Relief episode with your friends. I'll see you guys at the next Webcomic Relief. Take care.